And also this, big news today. The UK's Brexit negotiator has called for realism from the EU ahead of the next round of trade talks beginning in London. This is Lord Frost said there was still time for the two sides to agree a post-Brexit trade deal for next year. But he said the EU needed to recognise the UK's negotiating position came from that of a sovereign state. His words follow a pledge from Boris Johnson to walk away from talks if a deal isn't done by October the 15th. That's just over a month, of course. The exchange also comes after Number 10 revealed it would be introducing new legislation on customs rules in Northern Ireland in case the negotiations fail. Let's speak to Feargal Cochrane, Professor of International Conflict Analysis at the University of Kent and author of Northern Ireland, The Reluctant Peace. Nice to have you with us, Feargal. So fire away for us, if you would, sir, in kind of layman's terms. I understand that the suggestion is that Mr. Johnson is tinkering with the withdrawal agreement.
Well, good afternoon, Ian. I think the simplest way of trying to explain this is that this is really all about the withdrawal agreement and the protocol that was agreed last October, as you probably know, and as people probably know. And effectively, that was a bit like a divorce settlement. And, you know, it's effectively the lawyers have been in and, you know, they've drawn a line and apparently it was a good deal up until recently for the government. Now, the issue with this is that effectively, I think what the United Kingdom is now trying to do is introduce its own domestic law and have its own law, if you like, superseding its previous agreement, in other words, an international treaty. Now, the reason it's doing this is because what hasn't been settled is really all the detail. And it's the detail, you know, the devil literally is in the detail, as you probably know. And this law would allow the United Kingdom to unilaterally decide on the terms of the divorce, if you like. So can you imagine if you're having a divorce, you know, heaven forbid, but if you're having a divorce and you've got two sets of lawyers and one lawyer says to the other lawyer, look, we'll decide, just leave it with our side and we will ultimately arbitrate on the final outcome. Very few solicitors or lawyers are probably going to agree to that. And that's essentially really what the argument is about at the moment. So the politics of it is effectively a lot of consternation that, you know, the British government has signed an agreement one day and it looks like it's backing away from it another day. And so there's a big sort of trust issue now as well, sort of entering into the discussions.
And this is all loosely, Feargal, around that issue of the status of Northern Ireland in this to be sort of partly recognised as British, but also partly recognised as still EU territory.
Well, that's right. So come January the 1st, at the moment, with the agreement that's been signed up to by Boris Johnson, Northern Ireland would leave the EU on different terms to Great Britain. People have used the analogy of a swimming pool with, you know, London at the shallow end, if you like, and Belfast at the deep end. And Northern Ireland would adhere to European customs and trading standards in a way that GB would not. Now, that, of course, is why the DUP and Unionists got so upset about it last year and continue to be upset. So actually, so there's an issue here about if the United Kingdom is now looking to back away from what they have agreed to, it does call into question what type of border we're going to end up with. And it puts the border in Ireland back on the table for a lot of people. You know, that would be the worry, that the alternative to the current arrangement that's been agreed to would be a hard border in Ireland with all the difficulties that we've rehearsed for years about that topic.
Yeah, and of course, very easy to say, well, just stick some kind of check-in at, you know, at the docks, Belfast, that neck of the woods, and let's see what happens. But of course, as you say, the DUP and the like will never countenance this.
Well, it's that's right, but it's a very, very unusual world that we live in. So we this afternoon had, as I understand it, the Northern Ireland Secretary of State in Parliament saying that the government were going to break the law on certain, you know, we're going to break this international law in certain limited ways. And I can't remember a government saying they're intentionally going to break an international treaty in Parliament. There may have been an occasion, but that's one for your quiz, your quizzers.
But they're not going to put a border back up, though, are they? I mean, that's we can.
Well, they've agreed. That's what they agreed to do in last October, and have been agreeing to do. They're not calling it a border.
No, indeed. That's my point.
What it is. Effectively, what it is. And that was the passport to getting a deal. Yeah. And that's what Boris Johnson agreed to last year. He now seems to be trying to edge away from that. Now, there is form here, actually, because under the terms of the Good Friday Agreement, as you may know, people in Northern Ireland are allowed to have the citizenship of their choice. They can be Irish, or they can be British, or they can be both Irish and British. Right now, that was an international treaty, the Good Friday Agreement, but the Home Office fought that with Emma D'Souza's case, and said that actually you're British whether you call yourself what you like, but you're actually British because that's where you're born. So this was another example where United Kingdom legislation was at odds with its international treaty.
Sure.
So it makes an international treaty, but its domestic law says something else. So what we're looking at now is a sort of paradox, potentially, between UK law, which is on the one side, and its international treaties and international legal obligations on the other side, and effectively Great United Kingdom saying, well, our domestic law is sovereign, and therefore whatever our treaties say isn't as important as our domestic law, which then raises a question for every other country in the world. You know, as Theresa May said today, what would other countries think of the promises that the United Kingdom provides if it agrees in the morning and disagrees in the afternoon? I'm paraphrasing there slightly, but
that was pretty much what she said. So what is your own gut, Feargal, on where this is likely to go? Of course, we could still get a nice shiny deal out of all of this yet.
Yes, well, I mean, the way I read it is that Boris Johnson is sort of playing a hardball negotiation at one level. He's hoping that he can get some agreements in the parallel process, which is the joint committee that Michael Gove is running, which is supposed to be dealing with a lot of the detail of this. That if he can get some agreement either bilaterally with Ireland or with the EU over maybe a light touch border between Great Britain and Northern Ireland, you know, could they get some agreement that would be very light touch, you know, that would not necessarily require infrastructure in the Irish Sea, that would be politically very damaging for Boris Johnson. So I think this is part of Boris Johnson trying to play politics and trying to sort of get leverage with the EU. He's also talking up no deal as a good outcome for the United Kingdom. That's another sort of way of managing the politics of this. You know, going back to no deal is better than a bad deal sort of narrative.
Yeah.
But you know, no deal is very bad, and you know, I think what we saw last year was Boris Johnson effectively conceding at the 11th hour. We'll have to see whether he does the same this time around. I'm very surprised if the EU treats this with any seriousness.
Yeah.
To be honest,
we
could be proved wrong. Of course,
indeed. But it's certainly troubling times, regardless of where somebody sits on the Brexit debate. Professor Feargal Cochrane, thank you. Professor of International Conflicts Analysis and author of Northern Ireland, the Reluctant Peace. He's from the University of Kent.